this episode of the podcast, I sat down with Satya. This is my second time speaking to Satya. The first episode that we shot with her was a number of months ago, probably maybe even close to a year ago now. I enjoyed that conversation. Since then, I've gotten to know Satya a bit more. I had the opportunity to be a guest and attend one of her modules for the school that she founded and runs. And I was really impressed by her work, by her presence, by her real skill of going in and being able to combine different types of therapy to really form kind of cathartic experiences for people, and really training them to become a certain type of practitioner in this work. I think she's very skilled and just has a beautiful presence, a beautiful wisdom. We spoke about a lot of these things on this episode, about this idea of combining different modalities. What are the benefits of that? Some of the drawbacks. We spoke about things such as diagnosis and what that entails, how to train oneself for that, how to teach that to other people. These ideas of presence, of really tuning in to being able to sit with someone, to really see and to feel where they're at. We spoke about a lot of things, plant medicines, ayahuasca, which I think we both have a real reverence for. We spoke about kind of these ideas of bridging this more ancient wisdom, this ceremonial wisdom, this traditional wisdom, with some of the more emerging kind of Western ways of working with these plants or substances. What are some of the benefits of that, and what are some of the drawbacks of that? It was a really beautiful conversation. Satya really has a deep wisdom. A lot of the things that she speaks about and shares, I very much resonate with. I think one of the interesting things about these plants is they often have this idea of truth to them. And I think when people have gone deep down these paths, that truth begins to emerge, and that truth is universal. And so many of the things that I found, I also see in her, and I think vice versa. So there's a lot of wisdom in this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you to Satya for coming on, for everyone involved in helping to bring this together. And I think that's it. As always, actually, also I'm back in Portugal right now, preparing for upcoming dieta, plant medicine dieta. We still have a few spaces left for that. That's a really beautiful opportunity to go deeper into this plant medicine world, to experience the healing, the benefits, the wisdom, the teaching of these plants. So myself and my colleague Marav Artsy, I believe, we begin April 21st. And as I said, we still have a few spots for that available. So if you're interested in that, or you'd like to learn more information about that, you can go to my website at nicotianarustica.org. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And as always, if you're able to help with this podcast, that's a really big help to me. Patreon is a really good way to give back. It's a website. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Those tiers give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. As always, to all the people supporting that way, thank you very much for your help. It means a lot. It really helps to allow me to continue making these episodes. And if you're able to do that, thank you in advance. And if you're not, as always, just helping with the algorithms is a really big help. So if you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video, and if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or Spotify, leaving a starred rating and a short review. That really helps with the algorithms. So I think that's it for the intro. I hope this finds you all well. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Satya.
I'm running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out of the maze today. Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out from the maze today. I'm running out from the maze, running out from the maze, run out of the maze today.
Well, thank you for agreeing to do this again. It was a bit kind of all short notice, and we just arrived back in Portugal, and but I met you through my now wife, Sophia. She works with you. She has amazing things to say, many things to say. You also officiated our wedding, which was really beautiful, and thank you again for doing that. This is the second episode, so I think also if anyone's maybe curious of learning more about you, they can go to that first episode. I can't remember which number it was, but it wasn't so long ago. So I think there you gave maybe more about your backstory, so if people are interested, they can go to that episode. But just as a standalone episode, maybe you can just give a very condensed maybe version of your story and who you are, what brought you here, and just kind of in general what it is that you do.
So first of all, I'm very happy to be here with you again and to see Nikita. It's a beautiful seed of love. It's very beautiful. So what do I do here in this life? I work to, at the end, is to help people and myself to overcome suffering and to expand who we truly are into a point of true contentment in our soul. So I use different techniques. I use plant medicine, especially ayahuasca. I believe is one of the most beautiful, intelligent keys, being, spirits that the universe gave to us to help us in this time of humanity. And then I work with psychotherapy, meditation, ancient wisdom, rituals. So a person that comes to us in our school or retreat, they can see themselves from different angles. So they have a wider or a bigger opportunity to really come closer to their true essence, who they are. And I believe this work is for life, as I see for myself. Always unfolding something, not from the desperate point, but from the place many times of even silence, how we could grow in a certain area of our life. And then after some years, we can see how can we grow even more and how can we go deeper and how that becomes wisdom at the end. I came out from a very intense session for myself 2 days ago. I'm still processing a lot. And I was like, how it's possible that our body memorize all these patterns, ours as a child, and everything that happens to us, but not even ours, from our ancestors too. And only through that point of security inside of us, we can go deeper. So I think it's a work that we all, especially the ones that we say that we are working to support healing in others, we really need to unfold every day, to unpack, and of course, embracing what we already did too.
The first time we spoke, I really didn't know much about you. But then since then, I had the opportunity of attending just kind of partially a few days of one of your workshops. And I was very impressed of just kind of how you bring a lot of different modalities together. In the last podcast, we spoke a bit more about your story, kind of the trauma you had in childhood and how that kind of guided you and led you on a personal journey. How did you begin to incorporate all of these different modalities? Because I think a lot of people are not good at even one thing. There's a lot of that now, especially in this field of work. And then there's a lot of people who are very good at one thing and they kind of specialize in that. But I think it's rare. And I think it's something a lot of people try and do is kind of bringing a lot of different modalities together. But sometimes in a way they never end up doing any of them very well. There can still be benefit to that of, maybe doing things 70% or something, but it seems like you have a lot of expertise and you're able to bring those different modalities well. What was that journey like of you learning from all of these different modalities of something like ayahuasca or psychotherapy? A lot of your work was very, very hands-on, very personal, very direct with someone. What was kind of the journey that helped you to learn to do what you're doing now?
I believe the journey was my own, and I was acknowledging how a modality could help me to go deeper in a certain perspective, and the other, for example, breathwork or movements or bioenergetic or somatic approach, how that was bringing my body to embody the mental and the emotional part, and through the body to release and to expand. At the same time, I was observing how ayahuasca was giving me something that nothing else was giving. That is a depth in spirituality, in the communication with my ancestral lineage that lives inside of me, in my body. So I believe, now that you are asking me, I never thought like that, but now that you are asking me, I believe that is through consciousness, to really be present for each thing, to each modality, understand how that can help, and how that can help the person going to specific areas, but they are all interconnected. So that's why I consider very valuable that we have different modalities, because it's not that the person will discover a totally different thing, but a different perspective from the same thing that gives a little part of the puzzle more, that gives you another understanding, another feeling about it, and that can help your consciousness to unfold. I believe it's not more to unfold more in not only in to know more, but to become more silent, because that little part was owned and integrated in that perspective, in that modality. And that's why I believe different. It's like making love. If we make love all the same way, it's because somehow we are attached to a mechanic thing. We are not allowing ourselves to be authentic in the moment. So when we have different modalities, it helps us to see ourselves in different ways. And that cleans what normally we are attached by our personality. For example, only catharsis creates an addiction to catharsis. So it's very easy then to shout or to cry. But sometimes we need to know how to hold it, how to hold that, to contain, and to see what unfolds from there. For other people, they need to know how to release. So I believe that is about that, because I saw that in myself, how different things were helping me.
And when you're working or when you're teaching, how do you find that balance? Because kind of like I was speaking about, I mean, often we tend to work in one modality, and that becomes like our primary modality. And I think it's an interesting thing in that I think a lot of times also these modalities are kind of sold as if it's a cure-all, or it's good for everyone. Like ayahuasca is good for everyone, or somatic therapy is good for everyone. But obviously we're humans, we go through our own journey, our own evolution, we're at different stages and different points of our lives, like different things are going to resonate with us or be helpful with us. I mean, much like pharmaceutical medicine, like no one would ever think you would go to a pharmacy and just consume all of the different medications. That would be crazy. And yet I think often with a lot of this work, there's kind of this idea that everything is good and anything that you consume will somehow help you. how do you begin to kind of navigate of, like, if you're diagnosing someone or if you're teaching people, are you, I mean, I guess working with someone one-on-one is different from teaching, but for example, in teaching, are you just, is the idea to give people as many tools and then see what resonates with them because certain people are going to be drawn to more tools? Or is the idea to kind of give everyone a certain set of tools so that when they're working, they can draw upon these different tools?
It's more the second part. When I'm giving all the tools, or the tools that I give them, not all the tools, it's more for them to understand what tool they can use with someone. And I believe when we diagnose the person, of course we know the story, we know what happened, but even knowing that, I believe the most important thing is our presence, to read the frequency, to be in the presence of the person and feel that person. Because even two brothers or two sisters can have the same story and they need totally different things. Because the way they perceive the situation, they perceive what happened to them was totally different. So when we give different tools, it's for them to have a toolkit to understand what can help better, and to understand too, okay, I tried this, didn't work really, really well, didn't resonate with the person right now, let's change. And what I see in different times of people's life, they need different things. Because they are in different emotional environment inside, even their growth, it's different when they start the journey. So maybe in the beginning, many people need softness, others need strength, and then it starts to change according to their growth. And us, I believe the healers, we need to have that perception, to resonate with that, and not to do what we think it's good for the person. We need to allow the person to show us what they need. And another thing is, you can't do this without doing your own work. You can't understand the other person if you don't really are in touch with yourself. Because if we are not in touch with ourselves, our mechanism of resonance is not awakened. That's why for me in the school, in the beginning of the day, it's a little bit more theory. We start always with a meditation practice, strong one. But then those 2-3 hours after is theory, and the rest of the day is practice. Because what I want to deliver to them, to my students, is that they have a space where they can really practice. So they tune in the resonate mechanism, the presence that we all have inside, waiting to be discovered, remembered. Maybe remembered is the right word. So they can use it. And then the technique is easy, honestly. When we develop ourselves, the technique is very easy. When we are using the technique and focus only on the technique, it's when things become very mechanic, out of place, out of timing, because we are wanting to inflict what we think we should, and we are not really attentive, we are not really paying attention, we are not in presence.
And how do you, this is a big question, but how do you think you begin to teach that? Because I would imagine obviously we're all different, like we all have different gifts. Some people are more present, and like anything can be worked on. And also, as you said, like I think a big part of that is also someone doing their own work. I remember, because I worked for many years at a big ayahuasca center, a Shipibo center, and so I worked with a lot of Shipibo, and it was interesting because I would sit with them in ceremony, almost every night, and they would often say what they saw, like this person has this, or they would be on ayahuasca and they would say, like I see this and I see this. And whenever I would drink ayahuasca, I would look and I didn't see anything, and I was like there was something that I thought that they were seeing that I needed to see in the same way. Mm-hmm. And one time after many years, I was getting quite frustrated, and I sat in a ceremony for myself. And it was very rare that I would come with strong intentions. I think for me, mainly out of respect, because usually if I had a very strong intention, it was answered. And so there was kind of a humility of not wanting to kind of take that for granted. So so one time I came with a very strong intention, like, teach me to diagnose, teach me to see how they see. And nothing happened in the ceremony. And I was quite disappointed, also confused, because usually when I had a strong intention, like, it was answered, but it was just nothing. And then I think a day or two passed, and I don't remember the exact circumstance, but I think I was in my tambo sitting there, and this kind of vision came from when I was a child that I had completely forgotten about. And part of my family is interesting, and my uncle, he's like a ghost hunter, so almost like Ghostbusters. He has all this, he's a mechanic, an electrician, so he designed all this equipment, and his wife is very intuitive, and she she's kind of a medium, and one of her friends she's like the main medium kind of their group. And as a child, I thought it was very strange that this woman was like going into houses and talking to energies that I couldn't perceive. But I remember the first time I met her, she looked at me and she said, and it was very strange as a kid, she said, you can see through people, you can see into people. And something resonated with that, but I didn't understand what she was saying, and I'd completely forgotten about it. But I was sitting in my tambo, many years later, and that image, that experience came back to me. And I realized that it was in me. It was just the way that I was diagnosing people. It wasn't what I thought that the Shipibo who I was working with were saying, but I was seeing the same things. For me, it wasn't necessarily a visual of this is this or this is this. It was more somatic. It was a felt sense. It was an intuition, and many things in my own way of what is their posture, what is the cadence, what are their eyes saying, how are they taking care of themselves, all of these little things. And then on top of that, with medicine, there's a deeper connection that began to open. But kind of the whole point of that was I realized like it was already there, but it was also like years and years of beginning to work to really understand all of these things. So how do you begin to teach someone that? Because I agree. I think there is something very, very strong in that diagnosis, which is the work of anyone who's going to begin to do this work. Is when someone sits in front of you, it's a big responsibility. Like how do you I think we take that for granted. We go to a doctor and we just assume like they're going to fix us, but there's so many, there's such a huge world, a universe of where do you begin? How do you pull these pieces together? And yet that presence, that really being able to sit with someone and see or feel on a deeper level, like what do they need? What's holding them back? What's going on with them? That seems like a lifelong process. And like I was saying, I think some people are naturally gifted in that way. Some people may be less so, but like any skill can be developed. How do you begin to help people to attune to that?
I believe it's through silence and observation. I believe that I'm born with it. I was a child that I was always attentive. And because I was deaf, I had to pay attention to people so I understand what they were saying because I couldn't hear. And I was very sensitive in my body, a frequency in the room or in the street. And for many years I had to understand what was mine and from others. I was feeling, normal, relaxed, and someone would appear and then I would feel strange, and I had to learn when was my transformation or someone influenced. And that helped me since very young to start to feel the other. And it's not only the other, it's the quantum field, what is going on here without the rational mind. So when we are working with people, we need to use the rational mind, of course, always. But there's a part of the observation that needs a lot of silence inside of us. Without silence, we can't really hear what the other person is saying, what words they are saying, what is the tone of the voice, in what moment they rise their voice or go low, or they are flat, it's their posture, but the eyes. But there's other thing that is what they don't say and how their body reacts to that. So for that, we need to have stillness inside, because if we are busy with ourselves, it's impossible to pay attention. And many times the frequency of the person, that when you develop that presence, you feel has matter many times. For example, sometimes I'm in a ceremony, not only the ayahuasca, breathwork, and I come close to the person and I have the sensation that I'm helping that person to deliver a baby. There's no baby there. And there's no strong movement of delivering. But it's like we are in that field. And then when the person shares, she says, I had the sensation that I was giving birth to myself. So the experience that they are experiencing, we can have access. But for that, we can't use only the rational mind. We need to have all our sense awaken. Intuition, perceptors of the body that sense frequencies. So how to teach this to people? First of all, to pay attention to themselves, what happens to them. And then what happens when they are triggered, what happens when they are in certain environments. And for that, they need to do a lot of self-process. They need to look inside, to read themselves. What happens when they are in contact with certain situations or other person? How do they feel? Why do they feel? And when they start to own themselves truly, that they are not only in the rational mind processing, but they are feeling, observing the situation, observing and absorbing, allowing that to be inside of them. When they can reach that point, it starts to be easy to really be here with another person. So for some, it's really easy. For others, because so many reasons, it's not easy and they need to train more. So I believe that is the only training. And with ayahuasca, many times people say, I saw. Yes, it's true, they have visions. But I believe the biggest vision is not even in visions, is we sense. And we can complement with visions. We can. But we need to understand if we are provoking the visions through our lens or if the vision is really there. So it's important in any situation that we always have a doubt. Like, maybe it's this, maybe it's not. Let me find out. From a humble space. Because I see many facilitators from any modality to become attached to what they see, what they perceive, and they want to be right. And then, of course, it's not about the person anymore, it's about them. So we need a lot of silence, a lot of humbleness, allowing us to be guided through the mysteries. I don't know why I'm doing this, but something is here. And sensing what is the reaction of the other person too. So a lot of self-process, a lot of emotional process, and self-observation, true self-observation, so they can own it.
You mentioned a word, doubt, which I think is super important. I think it's something that comes up in a lot of people's paths. And I was just having a conversation with one of our students the other day, and I think a lot of people look at doubt as something not good in a way. But with myself, I've always seen doubt as something very, very important, because it's very much, as you said, in a way it's keeping me humble. It's really making me question, like, am what I'm doing is right? Like, am where I at? I don't know if that's proper English, is where I'm at right now, like, is that where I should be at in a way? Like, am I able to hold that space? Am I able to do this? Is this in alignment? And I think doubt, in a way, really, it's a process of self-inquiry. It's a process of inner reflection. At the same time, doubt can also be harmful in a way. I think even Sophia said very beautifully that she read somewhere that doubt is the work of the devil. And when doubt becomes so heavy, so all-encompassing that it's making us question everything, then we can't shine, because it's like this weight, this pressure, this kind of darkness that's containing us. What do you think is that balance of doubt? Because I do think it's a very good thing, and as you said, if someone doesn't have doubt, that's a scary person.
Yes, it is. I believe doubt that comes from fear, lack of self-confidence, it can be very harmful, as you said, and take us to many times to depression. We don't trust ourselves. The doubt that I'm speaking, it's about a self-inquiry that we don't take anything from as granted. Like, for example, 2 days ago when I was in this very, very deep process, I was the last months asking myself, I was feeling I need help, something in me is stuck. Imagine that I was believing that I already did the entire work. Now I would push aside this doubt and not do what I did these last months. And it was incredible to come to a point that I saw how my suffering made me many times to become tough so I could defend, because my sexual abuse was really long, 5 to 13 every night. So I remember what was my doubt about my goodness when many years ago, and I had to start to work with myself. That was a very shadow point, was the work of the devil, that I was even doubting my goodness, myself, my essence, because of the trauma, because of the suffering. This doubt now brought me to the place that I could acknowledge all that pain that was memorized in my body, and how that pain memorized in the body that I carry every day was bringing me to a point of self-protection, because to be attacked was what I knew. So when people would trigger me in that point, I would defend in a very tough way. And I realized how tough I was sometimes without even wanting. So if we don't allow doubt, it's an inquiry. At the end, it's an inquiry. Am I really there? What I did was really correct? That allow us with consciousness to look and not to surrender to the pain, to the suffering, to the ego, to the shadow. No, we look both sides and then we reflect on it. And I believe the work with plant medicine really helps us to go to that place more than any other work. But we need to train consciousness every day. So the plant medicine can help us too, because I see many people taking plant medicine years and they don't see. They don't want to see. Because as it is for me, the suffering was so big that just to touch there, I didn't want. So it's the same for everyone, I believe. We don't want to touch there. So we convince ourselves that we already know who we are, and I'm a good person, for example, and I didn't do anything wrong, or I didn't hurt anyone. Maybe you did. Maybe you did. Not because you wanted, because you didn't know any other way. So doubt has self-inquiry is very helpful. Doubt that is triggering you to a point of deep shadow, that you don't love yourself, you don't trust yourself, that is something that needs a lot of attention. Help, Etienne.
It's an interesting point. Like you're speaking about plant medicine or ayahuasca, and it's interesting because they are very powerful tools and they can take us to very deep places. And yet I think like with any practice, I mean, I do jujitsu, for example. I mean, if someone does jujitsu for long enough, like they're going to get good. It's very difficult to not get good if you practice every day. And yet there also is something that separates people in the way they practice. Like there's some people who can practice for 5 years and they're at a much different level than someone who also has practiced 5 years, but something is separating them. And as you said, with plant medicine, you can see people who, I'm not sure exactly how to put this, but who are quite evolved in their own way after working with it. And yet there's also people who, for whatever reason, aren't. Like they're not able to see certain things. Do you have any sense of why that is? Is it just each person's natural evolution? Are there practices, or is it part, like, I think one thing you said is very insightful. I think it's very rare that people are willing to or wanting to or have that desire to go into their fear, because the fear is the very thing that we naturally avoid, because it is very strong, it's very fearful, it's very scary to go into that. And somehow it's a rare person who's willing to fully, not necessarily want to go into that, but who's somehow willing, who's willing to meet it. And there's a real, usually, gift that's waiting on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm. I believe that is the longing for true contentment, not because some book says to us. There's a longing inside that knows that it's like looking for the truth. I believe we can become really good technically in everything, as you said, but then there's the true dimension of that being that is not only on the pragmatical way, is how that person does it, how that person flourish through it. And I believe that is connected with truth to ourselves. Because if we are really afraid of suffering, because most of people, they are, and they don't, and they do anything to avoid that suffering. And they think they are doing, but at the end, they are not doing. They are just becoming really good on the technical level. So they do everything, they become stronger, even with bigger character, but to go exactly where they should go, they don't. And we perceive that. It's like, okay, that person speaks really well, or puts music really well, sings very well, or makes a breathwork, but there's something missing there. And what is missing? I believe that is ourselves. Our true, authentic self. There's a part that is still encapsulated, repressed. For me, I saw again. 2 days ago, I saw again. So I go, oh my God, I already went through so much about this sexual abuse and all the abuse in our lineage. And I came to a point that I went to this ceremony, that I went to the physical pain, and I was 7 hours just like learning. It was the learning to breathe through the pain and not to contract. And when we contract, we keep the pain, but to breathe and to let it go. So 7 hours learning something that I thought I knew. And my body and my soul in that ceremony showed me, no, you need to learn to really let go the pain. And that's why, because you vibrate in pain, because you vibrate in that toughness to protect yourself, you attract people that they do exactly the same thing that your family did. Betrayal. They were not there to save me from my stepfather. Betrayed of a person that I really love, that is my stepfather, and he was coming to me every night, keeping the pain. So I was in relationships that they were betraying me, they were betraying my confidence, not looking for my needs as I looked for other people, and I was even keeping that pain. And I did a lot of work. And now, 2 days ago, I realized, oh my God, I didn't know how to detach from pain all these years. I did a lot of work. I grew a lot. No matter what, I'm still learning. And it was very, very difficult, but at the same time, really liberating. So to feel all that pain that I had to contract all those years, all those nights, that they were still here. So it's not easy. There was moments that I don't want to do more, and then, no, you need to do this. Otherwise, you will live with this the entire rest of your life. Why do you want to stay there? Why do you want to attract more people like that? Do your work. So I think this inner dialogue that comes from the soul level, that gives us the strength to see, to feel what is there and to overcome, I think is bigger in certain people than the fear of suffering again. And that is what is missing, even in very good, technical people. And we sense there's something like we don't trust. Why? Because they don't trust themselves to do their own work. And for me, people didn't trust for sure. Maybe. Because maybe they could perceive it too.
I'm curious, I kind of imagine that in a way I already know the answer, but I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with too as they begin to do this path or work with different modalities, or even in plant medicine, working with different plant medicines, is this theme that as you said, like we often think, okay, like I work with this plant and I go really deep, or I work with this practice and I go really deep. Now that core issue is resolved. And yet then often we go to another modality and it comes up again. And there's often this kind of disappointment, or we take it very personal, as if like I didn't do my work, or I let myself down, or like why is it still there? But like often in my own work, because even when we're doing dietas, like it's a common theme that comes up where people work with a totally different plant or tree, and yet it takes them back there. And yet each time, I think what also maybe takes some wisdom to see is that like they're not approaching it from the same place. Like they're approaching it from another place. So while it's the same issue, there's a different quality now to it. There's still work to be done, but each of these plants it's like its own doctor. It has its own way of working, and so every time it can still touch on that, but from a different place, almost like polishing a stone. Do you notice that in your work, that even with people doing these different modalities, that there's often kind of core issues that every person is coming with, that even if they've been doing it 10, 20, 30, 50 years, like there's still going to be resonance of those things that they're working on?
Yesterday I was doing a podcast with Dr. Richard Miller. You need to know this person. I want to put you in contact. You're going to love this man. He's 86 years old. And we were speaking about sexual abuse in a part of the podcast because he was sexual abused too. And he told me, Satya, I'm 86. I did all this work. He was a psychologist, did a lot of transformational work. He was holding that space for thousands of people. He has a retreat center in nature, as I have the reservation. So we were really similar in that sense. In the story, we really met. It was like, wow. And he said, I still feel that I need to be small. And I'm 86 with all this work. And he was one of the first in psychedelics, and we're speaking about psychedelics and writing books about psychedelics. He's a wonderful person. And you can sense a lot of humbleness, but at the same time, a lot of power. Beautiful, beautiful. I think I really want to put you in, you're going to love each other. And I believe the core wound is like the core awakening, is what I believe. Because when we are really faithful to see what is there, there's a true humbleness that makes us grow, a little bit more. For what I saw now, it was not from, as you said, not from the same place that I saw myself 10 years ago or 20 or 30 when I started to work. It was from a totally different space. my maturity, my wisdom, and my humbleness is bigger than was before, because the need for self-defense is less. So it's much more simple. So that's why we can speak about it naturally. The ones that they come to a point, and I see many students of mine saying, Satya again, mom and papa, or whatever it is. And I say, yes. And what do you want to do with that? Do you want to keep on complaining that you already did a lot of work and you are stuck in complaining? Is where you are, otherwise would not come. Or you can decide, I push it aside. Maybe one day or another life, you know. It's not where we are, it's how we approach where we are, I believe. And the growth is in that. I believe the growth is in that. Imagine a relationship with our mother. Maybe she never changed, but if we change, all the relations change. Because we change, and they didn't do nothing. They just keep on being themselves. So with ourselves is the same. Because we transform our approach to ourselves and to life. Maybe with more discipline too. Maybe with more truth. Maybe with more love, with more compassion. Maybe with all. And it's a good mix already. So I believe it's more about that, not about if the theme comes back again. I think the themes will come back, but we go through them in a different way. And people normally ask me, do you think that it can be solved, integrated forever? I believe integration is a life process. And it becomes softer and softer because we become softer to the suffering, in the sense that we are not reacting and avoiding, but we are embracing. And as I was learning in this ceremony, was to absorb that, to absorb inside and to let it flow. And that, not observation, absorption, I don't know how to say this in English, transforms me. Because I'm not reacting to it. It is incredible, it is incredible. And then, now I can't wait to see how can I apply this to my relationships and my daily life, because this needs to be used in daily life. How if a person comes and really trigger me, what is my wisdom now, how I can put boundaries and limits without really reacting, but feeling that I would react. And I can absorb that and choose, okay, how do I really want to act on this? I think that is a life journey, honestly, for all of us.
I remember when I kind of began my own journey many years ago, I heard or read somewhere, I probably won't say it exactly right, but essentially that whatever pain or suffering that as you said, like our own energetic imprint, whether it's from this life, from whenever, that really is the key. That's the gateway to our own liberation. And I think many people can understand that on an intellectual level, as you said, on a rational level. They're like, okay, I understand that. But it's a much different thing to embody that and to see that, you know, every time that's coming up, there's a portal, there's a gateway there. Mm-hmm. And yet that's the very thing where, as you said, we contract. One thing that I think you said is really interesting, and I like the way you put it, which is quite similar to how I usually put it. And often in this kind of plant medicine work, there's this idea that we end these ancestral patterns. We do this work in a selfish sense, in a good way, like we have to do it ourselves. No one else is going to do it. And yet, because everything in life is relational, there's the relationship to the self, there's the relationship to our loved ones, to our work, to our creation, to our family. As we begin to do this work, those relational aspects, those bonds, those ties are also transformed. I think it's often seen in maybe more of a woo-woo kind of ephemeral way of somehow in the ether these things are getting worked on. But I think, as you said, is really, really beautiful that There's a woman who I have a lot of respect for. Her name is Byron Katie, and she has a quote that always really stuck with me. She said, it doesn't take two people to end a war. And I think that's usually the mentality that we think, like the war is between two, so it takes two to end it. But she says it only takes one. And I think it's pointing to that idea that you're speaking of. And just wondering if you can maybe speak a little bit more about that idea that when we do this work on ourselves, even if the other person isn't doing something, they're affected because we are in relationship to them. So as we do the work on ourselves, that relational aspect is automatically being worked on.
Totally, I love Byron Katie. She's really a wise person. I really believe in what you said. It only takes one, even if that means that we step away. We don't want even to provoke nothing. But when we really change, when we transform our inner life, the way we react, the way we perceive, it's impossible for that person not to be touched. And what she does with that, it's her responsibility, his responsibility. But immediately change everything. And then maybe some people will take the opportunity to come to the middle point, or others will even become more far away, because they don't want somehow to evolve. It's not to evolve. Maybe they are crystallized in their idea, so they can't stand to be close to a different frequency. But the ones that they are ready, I believe, when one change, the other take the opportunity to reframe themselves too. I really believe that. Let's see what will happen with these wars that they are happening now. Because that is one of the biggest examples. That is the collective unconscious shadow happening. And how we are all dealing with that. That is a reflection of the micro-universe in each one of us. I'm very curious to it already 3 years at least. For Russia and Ukraine. And for all of us. The way we interfere or not. Could be mom and papa fighting and all the kids around and friends looking to them.
It's an interesting point, and I'll quote Byron Katie again. But, and again, I hope I do it justice, but she says something like, because in most of our collective kind of worldview, when we think of evil, for many different reasons, often like Hitler is the example of that. But she said very beautifully, like, if you believed what Hitler believed, you would do the exact same thing.
Yes.
But that's very hard for people to accept. And I think a big part of that is also what you're pointing to, is that, like, the only way someone evolves or society evolves is to see that we have that within us. And, often I think those wars are a very interesting reflection, because we look at things in black and white of good and evil, and we say, like, how could someone do that? And yet we don't see that we do that every day. We do that in our daily lives with our words, with our thoughts.
Yes.
And obviously most of us don't have that power, that influence. But if we did, there would be wars all the time, everywhere of that
And
scale.
there is, in our homes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, there is. The way we think, the way we speak, exactly what you say. It's a war, but not with so much huge consequence. But if we go to the soul level, they have huge consequence, that they can live inside of our lineage or inside of ourselves till we have the courage to look and to do something with it. So maybe on this level of this dimension, it seems that they don't have so much consequence, but they have. The way we speak with each other, to our kids, to ourselves. I saw this for myself. Now, sometimes how I didn't know how to be in a different way. I was allowing and allowing and allowing, and then I would blow up. So that has a true consequence in that person's life. Because I didn't know, I was still learning how to put boundaries or how to not accept abuse. I was accepting. So all that is always interfering with everyone, mine, yours, hers. We are always, thank God we don't have so much, as you say, influence. Otherwise would be a crazy, even more crazy world than it is. As beautiful too, at the same time.
So one of the things you spoke a lot about was ayahuasca. It's a plant or a brew that also I've worked with fairly extensively. It's very interesting because in a lot of these kind of, for lack of better words, traditional or indigenous cultures, these plants or these sacraments were very much a part of the lives of these people, and not just their lives, like their worldview, their cosmovisions, their stories, how they interacted in this world. I mean, from even stronger plants like ayahuasca to even very subtle things like I think the ashwar, like they have a plant called wayusa, which is related to yerba mate. Maybe some people are familiar with that. But every morning you would ingest that, and there would usually be an older woman often who, as you ingested that, your dreams would start to come because it's quite stimulating, and it's like many of these plants, kind of putting you a bit in that space between the two worlds. And then based on the revelation of what your dreams were saying, that would guide the people in that day. And so like this idea that plants had a huge part in these people's lives. And it seems like something that in a lot of the cultures, probably most of the people listening to this, we've really gotten removed from that. And not that it wasn't there, like for sure it was there. Like even in my own work, it's been something that I've been very inspired by, like kind of taking this technology that I was gifted, that I learned in the Amazon, but then kind of mixing it with these traditions that we all come from, and like the Celtic tradition is still, there's still traces of it here in Europe, and even the language, the Ogham language, like every letter corresponds to a tree, and all of those trees, there's a wisdom, there's a medicinal aspect, a spiritual aspect, and that was literally in the language of the people. I mean, imagine if every time you're thinking of a letter or a word, there's this whole story behind it. But we've really become disconnected from that. So it seems like these plants were, such an integral part to the way of being of humans, to the natural evolution of humans. I mean, there's a beautiful story of one of my teachers. His name and title is Amika. He comes from a group of people in the Colombian Amazon in the Valpes region called the Tubu. And they have this beautiful story. It's a long story. I'll do a very short version. But that essentially eons ago, humans were suffering. And I think that's very valuable, even just that little piece, because we often think like we live in a world and everyone's suffering, and it's a suffering that no one's ever experienced before, both on a personal level and a societal level. But in the story, it was saying that even eons ago, in this pristine Amazon basin, people were suffering. And that these star kind of beings, interestingly from the star system Sirius, they heard this call, and they transcended the 12 dimensions of time and space in this primordial anaconda canoe. And on this canoe, they brought with them all of these different plants, and each plant has its place in the canoe. Interestingly, tobacco was the first plant, and the very last plant was ayahuasca. And ayahuasca is one of the 3 plants that was considered one of the queens of knowledge, the ability to transcend these 12 dimensions. But essentially, that these plants were given to humans to heed this call of suffering, because humans were suffering. And they say that the root of that was because we had forgotten who we are and where we come from. And that these plants were gifts to help us to remember that. And so they were fundamental keys, fundamental pieces in the evolution of humanity. this is a big question, but like a plant like ayahuasca or any sort of plant medicine, why do you think they're so important? You mentioned that even in all of these modalities that you work with, you find that they hold a special place. They're able to potentially take people to a place that some of these other modalities may not be able to take them. What do you think are the keys, or what are these medicines able to provide people that they may not be able to experience in another modality? And, also these plants are really expanding. They're kind of almost everywhere now. Like when I started doing this work, if I said ayahuasca, no one had any idea what I was talking about. And now it's in the vernacular of people. Which I think is also an interesting evolution of how they are returning. But for you, why are those plants so powerful?
I love that story, and there's in the rat path there's a process that we call the canoe, and we give all those plants in one night to everyone. It's really strong work, but it's really helpful. It's not for everyone. Of course, even the ones who already take plant medicine, is only for what they call the strong spirits, that they are ready to overcome those layers without the fear of dying. There's so many things here, I really believe they are special because they have an interaction with our self-defense mechanism that almost nothing has. So that rational part that wants to be right, that wants to control, that wants to guide us in a certain direction, go low, and allow us to have access to our true essence. That is not easy because we don't remember who we truly are. So there's a dream of dreaming ourselves somehow in a certain way. There's a sleeping mode that we believe that life is like that. And through therapy, through breath work, through meditation, we go to a certain point. Meditation, we can go even the same places as plant medicine, but takes longer. Many people say, okay, if it takes longer, it's because we don't need anything. Yes, but I believe the plant medicines are traveling the planet because we are in very crucial time. The time where we can put everything in cause. Now we have the means to end up our planet Earth. If one of the leaders is not really well on their mind. So I believe plant medicine, as you said, 20 years ago or 30 years ago when we started, no one knew. Only a few of us, we were really going to the jungle and doing this work, not because someone told us. It's incredible how we got there, all of us. If we stop to think where people were speaking, maybe nowhere, but we felt it. We knew there was something there and we wanted, and we started to look and we found. Now is the opposite. I believe the plant medicines are coming out because we really need help. We need to wake up, to remember who we are, to wake up from this sleeping mode that we are identified with personality, with having, with attachments, even now with attachment of being spiritual, this new age spirituality. I really believe there's many people that they are confused. They believe that spirituality is how we dress, how we eat, if we all do plant medicine, if we all sing the same songs. No, that is an expression of spirituality. Spirituality is how we live everyday life. And I believe plant medicine came out because of that, because we really need help. And we are nature, as you said, each word had a tree. Why? Because we are that nature. We are always in relationship. So the tree that has branch like this bring us an information. When we eat that vegetable, we receive another information. When we die, we put all this information on the earth or on the fire, into the great mystery. But everything that comes a part of matter, that everything here has matter too, when matter is integrated again in other matter, the energy, the spirit is integrated in the spiritual level too. And we don't remember this. We read this, we know this, but we don't feel it. And I believe that plant medicines are the keys for feeling this again. To feel this connection, to feel this, it's not even connection, it's interconnection, interdependence. We are them, they are us. And we live all through each other. And we will even discover in some moments, without plant medicines, that we all have other species as our neighbors. And I'm very curious what will go on the next years. I really want to stay alive and perceive and to experience. I think it's going to be very interesting the next years of if we stay alive.
Can you speak more? I think that's an interesting point that a lot of people don't think about. Is we usually, if we're ingesting a plant medicine, a sacrament, it's more this idea that I'm taking on something else. So I'm just receptive. I'm just on the receiving end of whatever this is. But
I don't believe that.
Yeah, like everything, there's this relational aspect.
Yes.
So there's also something that then we're living from this plant, or this idea of embodying this knowledge, or us also having a relational aspect with this plant. Can you speak more about that? Because I think, again, we usually have this view that it's like a one-way street.
By the opposite. I believe we ingest, she manifests in certain ways inside of us, but is in the relationship, the way we perceive her, what we give to her, the respect that we give, how we allow her to guide us or not, what are our fears. For example, marijuana. She is a teacher plant, but the way people were taking her bring to the spiritual field, to the electromagnetic field, to the quantum field, how we respect or not. So a lot of disrespect, that plant is used as just an object for, fading away or having fun. People just forgot what is the sacrament of that plant. And I believe it's a lot related with love even. She awakens love too. So we imprint that in that plant. And it's coming the idea that she starts to believe that she is that, how we treat her too. Exactly what we do to our kids. The way we treat them, they start to believe that they are that. Imagine a very sick mother or father saying you are stupid all the time. They start to believe. And I believe that these relationships with plants is the same thing. And we lost this wisdom, we lost this relationship because we lost with ourselves. So we lost with everything. We don't treat ourselves as sacred, that we deserve to heal, that we deserve to take care of our body in a certain way, that we deserve rest, that we deserve to be acknowledged first by ourselves. So we got lost. I believe that we totally got lost. Totally, I don't say, because there's many people awakening and always awakened since all the times. But we imprint on the plant's world, on the spiritual level, that then that information comes to the plants that they are in matter too. So that's why the relationship by the indigenous tribes were totally different from what we are doing now. We are consuming these plants for my own benefit only. I need to heal. Okay. The healing that they help us is to awaken our heart, to see what is our shadow, to overcome. But then there's another relationship. What can I give? How can I give? To them and to the world. And I believe that is the healing of this awakening. I think is the imprint that the plants wants to bring to us, but we need to be responsible for that too. If a person takes any teacher plant in a context that is, for example, a place full of alcohol, everyone doing whatever, we are just saying that is the respect that we bring to ourselves and to the plant, is that environment. It's bigger, and inside of us there is that environment, not outside only. So the plants receive it, the plants, and they know who is who, I believe. I believe that.
Purity of heart.
Yes, they see that. And I believe the more we trust the plants, the less fear you have, because you trust that they are taking you to the place that you need to look and to heal.
So one of the things you're beginning to do now, from what I understand, is a course, a training on specifically psilocybin, maybe psychedelics in general, but starting with psilocybin. I think psilocybin is interesting. I mean, technically it's not a plant medicine, it's fungi, but it acts, I think, in very similar ways to plants like ayahuasca or some of these stronger plants. And yet it's also something that we can find, and from where most of the people who I would imagine are working with you, it's something that's there, it's present, it's probably been there for a long time. What does psilocybin mean to you, and why kind of all the plants did you choose to begin focusing on that?
Because it's legal, honestly. I believe that we are in time that the medical culture are appropriating this work in name of therapy. And I believe this work is much bigger than therapy. It's about the evolution of consciousness. So there was a moment in my life that I said, maybe I don't work anymore on this so I don't harm this environment. And then I realized through a lot of meditation and inquiry, but why should not I defend what I believe, this sacred relationship that we need to develop with all these plants, in a way that maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 people or thousands of people can remind that. Because if I withdraw, because I thought to withdraw totally, like I don't want to belong to this, was I really contributing? And then I realized maybe not, it's the easy way. And I went to California 2 years ago to study with ketamine, because I never took a synthetic. And I was wondering, what is the power of this? What would be the work with this? It really helps. What I realized, they are really powerful spirits created in labs, but they have a spiritual world too. Totally different from the plants, because it is, totally. But I want to say that I acknowledge their power and their strength and their wisdom too. It was very beautiful what I realized. I never expected, honestly, with totally different qualities. But even those ones, they need to be respected. They need to people to take them as sacraments and not as a pill for therapy or to feel better, because the work goes beyond that. It takes us to the core of our healing, that is to awaken, to expand consciousness, to reestablish relationship with ourselves and the mystery and nature and each other. So that's why I said, okay, if I'm a modern woman that I born here in Portugal, in Europe, and I was guided to meet Amazon many years ago and the plants, and I gave my life to that work, and I give my life to that work, and somehow all these years has been a good bridge between the modern world, the therapy, science, and this work has exactly it is. So why not to bring this message to a more doctor field, medical field? Because most of doctors and most of psychologists and psychiatrists, my mother is a psychologist, I'm a lawyer by studies. Everything around universities is about competition. You become the best technical person and you go through everyone and you become number one. With these medicines, the message is the opposite. How we become more humble, more cautious, more loving, more caring is where the plants are taking us. To be more humans again, to remember what is humanity, so the relationship with nature. So I said, okay, maybe I can be one defending this information. Not defending, but to make it sacred is what I sense. So to work with ayahuasca in Peru, Brazil, okay, we can do it. But maybe all these people that they want to start working, they will not go there because they think that they can give even without taking. And it's the opposite. They need to do like internship with those plants or those substances. So they understand what they are inducing in people, what they are opening, what doors they are opening. But most of them, they don't even take it. So it's like a contradiction, it's lack of integrity. So that's why I decided, okay, I will go. I will do the first one. And I have a lot of good scientists, good psychologists in the training. David Nutt is their professor, David Nutt, and all amazing names. And then there's the part of learning how to work in an ancient way, indigenous way, and sacred way, and how to combine both worlds.
This is a big question, but what would you say are ones that come to mind, some of these kind of archetypal differences between the more indigenous, the more ceremonial way, and the more modern way? I mean, one you mentioned, which I think is super important, which doesn't get spoken about enough, which is often in this more modern kind of medical therapeutic use, these plants or these substances are seen specifically as therapeutic tools for overcoming trauma, anxiety, depression, PTSD, but they're kind of reduced down to something very specific, almost like working in an allopathic medical model, but instead of using a pharmaceutical, it's something that's somewhat natural or derived from something natural. Whereas often in more traditional or indigenous ways, also as you said, like for sure there's an individual aspect of why someone is taking it. They're sick. Mm-hmm. They're physically sick. They're maybe less so than in the Western world, but mentally somehow not in balance. But very often, I mean, those are very like specific or acute reasons that someone would take it. I mean, that's not usually the way they're taken in a broader sense. It's usually some sort of ceremonial aspect involving a bigger picture not just you, but potentially your family, your community, your tribe, your relationship to the natural world, which is also seen where a lot of disbalance or inorder comes from, is not being in right relationship to things. And there's something very cosmic about it. I mean, there's something that's beyond just ourselves. It's, I heard it, I think, said very beautifully, is often as Westerners, we're looking to heal more of the past. And often in a lot more traditional communities, they're also looking at the future. They're looking at the expansiveness of what are possibilities. And I think that is part of maybe a worldview too, where we have become very focused on the past, on who I was, and that means who I am now, rather than this kind of maybe more expansive view. And again, it's not even to say that necessarily one is better or worse, although I do think probably one is a better way if you had a choice. But what do you think are some of those other kind of archetypal ways where these systems would differ? I mean, as you said, like ketamine, you felt it has its own world, its own spirit. Obviously, these things are very beneficial. I mean, I think Johns Hopkins had a study with psilocybin where they gave it to people who were terminally ill, and a very high percentage of them, I can't remember now, but I think 8 in 10, not only was it seen as extremely beneficial, but for the majority of those, it was one of the top 3 most profound experiences of their life. So that's a big deal. I mean, that's a few day or a few week study where people are having very revelational experiences, and it's making them go to their deathbed in a better way. I mean, that's huge. I mean, what other modalities do we have that allow someone to do that? But just kind of speaking in maybe kind of big archetypes, but for you, like, what do you see as these differences of someone who's spent time in more traditional societies in the Amazon, seeing how these plants have been worked with, and then also someone, as you're saying, who is European, who was born here, who's also seeing how this more medical system is beginning to unfold?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I think the medical system is, even now, the ones who work with psychedelics are changing, is that the sacraments are taken normally in community. And in the Western New Age psychedelic therapy, that is what is called, they are taken one-to-one. So you have a facilitator and one person or 2 facilitators to reproduce mom and papa, and one person. That is important work, very important to go to those places that you were speaking about, the past, to heal. And as you said, I believe these indigenous communities, they are looking for how they can guide their lives in a better way. Not only to heal the past. Of course, we need to heal the past many times to go forward, but it's not their, it's not their goal. The goal is for them to be in balance with the cosmos, with the unknown, with the mystery, and with nature itself. So they live in harmony. And in the Western way, we are taking these sacraments as a new stabilizer of humor, as a new, antidepressive pill. They even talk to take, the hard part of the journey. And it's in the hard part of the journey that you meet yourself, that you meet, not yourself, you meet a big part of yourself that needs attention. So it's more focused in what we can get from it. And here, Indigenous is how we can live all together. It's totally different approach. So we are taking as a commodity, as an object to help us. And it's a sacrament that deserves respect, reverence, we say? Reverence. Even because it's helping us to see more. It's helping us to see where we should go in balance with the whole. That for us here, the whole doesn't matter. We are the number one. We lost our place in nature. We lost our place in cosmos. There's a huge narcissism about our society now. We even say all the time, I healed. But it's not I healed, it's we healed. If I heal, we heal. So it's not only for me, it's for all of us that we do this. There's a part that is selfish, but it's not in a bad way. But we know that by doing that to myself, I'm helping the community. I'm helping my family. And I believe that we somehow we lost we lost this way, our way, that was our way. So maybe by doing the bridge, I believe that for modern man, they can realize better what they can receive from it and give back. If we just approach in hospitals, rooms in hospitals, all these machines, these empty walls, I think this work should be done in nature. Most of the time, you can be in a house closed because it's winter, it's snowing, but not in the middle of the city with all this interference, electromagnetic field distorted by all the electricity and vibrations of machines. We need to go back to the natural frequency, so we remember the natural frequency, and more we are becoming mechanical. So with artificial intelligence, for me, it's going to be very interesting, because most of people will choose to be, binário, human and machine, because we have more strength, we are faster, we can have access to more information. And I'm not saying that is bad. I can't say that is bad. But how to do this? Because we created that. It's our son and daughter. But how can we now live with it? And that comes from our own principles, from our connection again to remember who we are. So it's going to be very curious. I even believe that artificial intelligence will cause the same experience of psychedelics to people that come from a mechanical world. And maybe artificial intelligence was here already for thousands of years, and we just remembered and we found a way to give birth. So it's going to be fun somehow. It's not fun, it's going to be full of humor, like sarcastic humor, sad humor, happy humor, because we are in this exponential time where everything can go very wrong in the sense of killing life. But even that, if it's our way, maybe it's our way. Let's see. Or it can be very beautiful. We can have all these resources in a good way, in a way that gives more life, that helps more life to flourish.
You said in this red path that there's this ceremony where people are ingesting all of these different plants, and that it was only for the strong-spirited. The people who, I think you said, don't have a fear of death, or maybe, or at least have a healthier relationship to it. One of the things of doing, like, I often find it very interesting, like usually, like if I think of ayahuasca or iboga or even peyote, like a lot of these, the wachuma cactus, very often the native environments to these plants were quite harsh in a way, and not... like for me, for example, the Amazon is amazing. It's beautiful. I feel very, very at home there. It doesn't feel harsh in a way, and yet there is a harshness to it. Many thousands of kids die every year from malaria, for example. Yeah. Gabon with iboga. I mean, it's a very dense rainforest. The deserts where these peyote cacti grow. I think there's something in that that's also very powerful, as you said, like this fear of death, of uncertainty, of like not knowing, like, am I going to come out of this? As you said, often the difficulty of, like, maybe what you're referring to is I was also reading that they were trying to make an ayahuasca pill that wouldn't make you purge. But for sure, I'm sure some benefit can come of that. But also, as you were saying, like, not only is there a difficulty in the purge, but there's something that's energetically being released. And often the physical, the energetic, all of these things are connected. And if you remove a piece, you remove a piece. You remove a piece of something that's much bigger. And that idea of safety is something that I think is very, very fascinating, because obviously in this more pharmacological or psychedelic assisted therapy, that's something that I think a huge emphasis is being placed on. And again, for a large part, rightfully so. Like you don't want people dying doing that work. Like people are going to get healed. You certainly don't want to lose people. And yet, traditionally, a lot of these plants were initiatory plants, and they did, in some regard, take people to an energetic death, but also sometimes to a place where their physical health was in question. Like, will that person make it through? We're not sure. And it was often seen that was also maybe a part of their journey, is to really confront that. Like, what happens if your heart rate slows down to 1 beat a minute or speeds up to 1,000 beats a minute? That's going to bring all sorts of deep-seated imprints, resonance, emotions, often even having a very physical transformation on the body. I mean, like, knock on wood, when I was in the Amazon, I never got malaria, and it wasn't because I was special. It wasn't that the mosquitoes that were biting other people, weren't biting me. But I think a big part was also that work that I had done with certain trees that in a sense was physically purifying my blood, so that when I was bit, there was a resistance there. And all of these things have a balance, because again, I think of some of my friends, because I'm part of a community who does work with Iboga, and a lot of people go to Gabon, and the malaria there is very strong. And I even know a friend of mine, she actually died because she exhibited symptoms of malaria, but she didn't. She refused to take the pharmaceutical that combats it, and she thought it was part of kind of her integration process. And but those are real threats, Those are real threats when you go there. There's jaguars, there's anacondas, there's mosquitoes, there's all sorts of mosquito-borne illnesses. The aliveness of the jungle, the sounds, there's a very somatic experience, and obviously that doesn't necessarily fit so well in a more medical system, because you can't account for all of that. It's part of the unknown. It's part of the mystery. It's something that's not replicable. So obviously, in a way, you have to take that out in order to really get these kind of exact results, or to come up with protocols of how do you work in that way. How do you think those two systems can be bridged? Because again, there is an importance in both. Like, as you said, some people aren't going to go to the Amazon, and in a bigger picture, everyone can't go to the Amazon. Like, that's not sustainable.
And we hope they don't go. No, honestly, otherwise the Amazon will be invaded.
And yet, there is, for me, this kind of, this thing that's a very powerful part of people's experience. As you said, also like a group ceremony. There's something very powerful about that. Even in that relational aspect of like seeing that, like, my dad went down and worked with ayahuasca where I was working, and in his mind, he had a very difficult childhood. He suffered like no one else suffered, and then he went to this group ceremony, and he's like, "Wow, this woman had it so much worse than I did." Like, and just something very small like that, it had a huge impact on him. Like, he realized he didn't have the hardest life in the world. How do you begin to bridge those things? Because, all of those things, these kind of intangible things that I think we don't even necessarily maybe think about if we are going to a clinic or working something in this kind of more reductionist way. Is there a way to replicate that? Or, as you said, like, can that work be done in nature and still it can be safe, and, some of these variables can be accounted for? and I guess, do you think, like, do we have to be willing to give up certain things in order to also maybe experience some of the other things in that clinical setting? Like, for example, doing it in nature. Like, there's going to be things that we can't 100% make it safe, potentially, in a way. There could be a storm, there could be mosquitoes, there could be malaria, someone could get hypothermia. Although at the same time, I mean, even in a clinical setting, things can happen as well. But I think that's something that's really fascinating in kind of this bridging now of these two worlds of how do we take those things that in those traditional ceremonies can be so valuable. And do you have any insight of how you're like thinking or trying to find ways to bring those elements in?
Mm-hmm. So there's many questions here.
That was a big one.
So I believe that we can bring elements from both sides, and we should. For example, even people that goes to the jungle, they need to have the preparation part and the integration. I think in our days, there's no sense to do without that. When we started, maybe I was ready to die, honestly. I would go to Amazon and let's see what happens there. I was really ready. And I believe most of us, we were ready, even facing some fears. And it was their way. If that person dies, it's because it's their path. And people that goes now to Amazonia, at least with me, they need to sign all these documents saying that they are responsible for their lives because there's jaguars, anacondas, malaria. They are aware of it. I believe by facing death, we awaken. So everything that takes us from our comfort zone make us grow. And we give much more value to our own life when we arrive here. To a toilet, to a person that brings us food immediately. When in Amazonia, most of the time, you don't have anything. That is one thing that awakens us to life, and awake our spirit, our strength. When we need to face a storm and the tree falls in our tambu and we could die, we face really that. We face the storm, we face the tree, we face if I go outside, maybe there's an anaconda waiting for me. So I believe that awakens, and it's not for everyone. It's not. But it can happen here. You can have a storm here and, an earthquake. But it's not so common. The thing is, how to bridge these worlds in a way that the therapeutical environment is closer to the natural frequency. Maybe we don't do this in hospitals in cities. We start to create clinics in inland, and people need to go there. Even for the integration part, to rest in nature, with sounds of nature, with the vibration in nature, is easier than to be in a city with the cars and the smokes and coming out of this very deep experience. As you said, normally people acknowledge that is one of the most spiritual and deep and strongest experiences in their lives. So we need to bring nature to this therapeutical environment. So I would do those retreats, those psychedelic therapy in places of nature. I would bring people outside, even if there's no danger, there's no wolves, there's no bears, there's no snakes, but there's nature there. They can walk through it, they can work with the fire, they can work with the lakes, they can work with the mountain. Because just to be in nature is already a lot. And we are just using that on holidays. So in those experiences, I would integrate. I would integrate preparation, as I do. As maybe you do, I believe, preparation and integration work there. We need. There's now. But I prefer personally all the work in those hard places. And as you said, it's very curious, those plants born on those places. Because they were not to be taken for everyone, by everyone. So strong spirits that they are not afraid of death, that they confront death, they know that they can die. But for example, Toé grows everywhere. In Portugal is one of our teacher plants that no one uses it, thank God, in a wrong way, because it really kills. So I would use in this more natural environment that we can recreate here.
And what do you think are the benefits of the more medical psychological model? You mentioned working with psychologists or psychiatrists, medical doctors. I mean, I would imagine medical doctor, obviously you have a better understanding of maybe what's happening within the body. You have a certain protocol of understanding like who's ready for this medicine on a physical or physiological. And the psychological aspect, how do you think that's beneficial? Is that part of the preparation, the integration of helping people to understand the experience? And also, I think one thing a lot of people, I think less so now, but certainly something that still happens is, as we said, the Western psychological model has a very particular worldview, not for the better or for worse, but just everything has a worldview. It's how you see the world. Every human has a worldview. In general, often these experiences, you even kind of alluded to this, can open us to see things, to perceive things that aren't necessarily spoken about in our worldviews. So when you're working with a psychologist or psychiatrist, how are they able to also take something that may be outside of their worldview and be able to help someone to integrate that experience?
I believe first they need to take. A person that never takes will integrate only through that perspective that they have. So they need to know what is that environment, what happens to them, so they can have the wisdom to guide someone for integration. And I believe that everything about psychology is super important, because we live here, we live in this rational environment, we live in this pragmatical world, but we are not only that. So if a psychologist or a doctor understands that we are bigger than that part, that consciousness is what we truly are, that we are the great mystery, they can bring the information of those ceremonies into a pragmatical world, even if the information is not valuable for my relationship with my colleague, but is important for my relationship with the great mystery, that I know that I'm not just this life and one day I will die and I will come back to the one without the name, and how I surrender to that. Am I afraid or not? And that will transform me. If I integrate, if I do a true process, that will transform me personally and everything, the way I relate with everyone, and how I see life, how I give importance to certain things or not. So I believe the two worlds now, they need to live together. Even for the shamans, what we are now doing is to bring what we want to do, we didn't do yet. It's to bring shamans from the jungle to our school, so they learn all these therapeutical parts, so they can do that there too, to people that arrive to them. And when I'm in the jungle, everyone that works in our camp comes to me to do therapy. They say, Satya, can I bring my husband here? We need to talk. Okay. And the problems are the same. But their approach to it, it's a little bit bigger, more expansive. Because their relationship is with the jungle, is with their environment too. They don't feel separated. But they ask the same questions about sexuality, about how they deal with each other, everything. So I believe the worlds are merging more than ever.
Do you think that's maybe also one of the interesting things that's happening is because also in the more Western medical model, there's a very dispassionate way of looking at things, like the doctor, the healer is prescribing something, but they can have an intellectual understanding of that, but they didn't have to take it themselves. There wasn't necessarily a reason to take it themselves. I mean, if you didn't have that physical condition, why would you take something? And yet it's a very different, I think, model where if the person doing the work or the healing has to very deeply know that plant, or not necessarily plant, even substance, through ingesting it. Like there's a very different relation that's now happening. Like it's not so, I think, dispassionate in a way. It's not me and you have a problem and you have to take this and I'm going to give this to you to heal. I think there's something that begins to happen when they themselves have to take it. They're entering, even kind of de facto, into the world of something else or someone else. And I think there's a lot more maybe compassion or understanding that begins to arise in that process.
Yes, totally agree, totally. And even in, many years ago, and I think you know this, that is, normally the healer would take the plant, not the person in need. So is the healer in that sense enters the dimension of that person, the several dimensions, and dives in that. So he merged with that person. And there's a lot of parts of the work that is about the healer helping the person doing the work, but when the person can't do the work, the healer does the work many times for the person. Like on the physical level, we see has purging or blowing, I don't know, burping, I don't know the word. But on the spiritual level, you are there inside, and you even, you have relationship with other dimensions of that person or other beings. So there's a true connection. Has on the Western medical environment, that it doesn't exist even. It's like what we are saying here is almost crazy. Like exorcism in those spiritual levels, that we take entities that they are inside of that person or attached to that person. In the medical Western environment, what I'm saying is you need to go to psychiatry. So we deal with different things in these different worlds, but they are merging. There's much more people opening to this world. But how to experience these dimensions without losing contact with this reality, because we live here too. So I believe that is the merging of the two worlds that will, like science and spirituality, they are together, because we are always working from science perspective or spirituality. We are working on the mystery. We are trying to deepen, to understand better, to expand their science in a different way than spirituality. But I believe both need each other. Both, they need each other.
Do you think this has a potential to help the mental health of humanity? I mean, because it's interesting, even as you're speaking about these ideas like exorcism and entities, I think very much as you say, that's something that we kind of consider voodoo, or it's not real. And yet I think as people begin to do this work, you see that a lot of people are under the influence of these things, and yet we don't know what we do with these people, so we kind of push them aside. And yet it affects a lot of people. Like there's a lot of people who are mentally affected by things, and we just kind of push them aside, and then we don't see them, so we don't think it's out there. And yet, as you said, even this kind of idea of seeing the evil within us, all of these things, there's so many layers and relativity to that. We all have these things. And do you think this kind of work, as it maybe becomes more accessible in this more medical system, obviously, again, it's working on an individual, but do you see this also having kind of ripples in society and kind of bringing us together, healing us as a society as well?
I believe, yes. I think many people on mental health and they are, they are locked down. They need a totally different approach, and we can learn with the indigenous wisdom how to approach that. I'm not saying that it will work for everyone, but maybe for many would work. And in the other day I had a case that was a woman that she wanted to get pregnant. All the exams were good. She was doing, even our school, she was doing breathwork, psychotherapy, but she could not get pregnant. And she came to a ceremony, and she came in the middle of the session to me, Satya, I have a little girl that doesn't allow me to have kids. And she was already trying to have kids for a long time. And what do I do with her? So in that part of the work, I really went to see if I could. I asked her first, can you dialogue with that girl? No, she just turned the back to me. And so I started to do an arcana that is a cleaning and then energetic, to give more energy to the light body. And what I perceived there was that little girl was someone in her lineage that passed away really young, and she couldn't somehow let go that she didn't have a life. So somehow she was preventing many people in her lineage to have kids, because she was taking that kid's place. And I did the arcana, I blew the tobacco, or many other things. And I said, you need to go to your place. You need to. I had a dialogue with that entity being. And then we discovered, I spoke, and she told me, you did an exorcism. I felt that she's gone. So we didn't spoke that what I did. And then what happened is 2 weeks after she got pregnant. And then I said, it would be good that you go to your story, understand what, if someone died or, and she found out that yes. So, is it true? Is it real? We can't say. It works? Yes, it works many times. I will not say that is true. But in that dimension was true and had a consequence in her life, very strong one. Has what I was telling you about myself, all, the pain that was memorized in my body, that I went through 7 hours breathing, and I saw all my relationships, how through that pain, physical and emotional pain and fears and tension, I was repeating exactly the same things, a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, but still a lot. And when I acknowledge that, and because that pain is an entity, has a life itself, that doesn't allow me to live my potential, my joy, so all these, we can prove that is real. But when we see with the medicine, when we go into those places, and then we see the consequence of the cleaning, of the healing, no one can tell us, no, it was not true. We can say, in that dimension, that happened, in that ceremony, you had access to that, and because you had access to that, and you acknowledge, and you did your part on that healing, that is different for everyone in certain situations, brought you some freedom, and you see the consequence of that. The way we feel, the way we relate, what we attract. That's why, for me, this work has even no words to say how grateful I feel.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. The duality of rationality and mystery. We're also getting a sign that I think we need to wrap up.
We need to go. What time is it?
Almost 2.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We really need to go.
So, I'll put this in the show notes, but if people are interested in the course or just working with you...
The course is working with psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
In our working with Satya.Com, they have access to that. And in our Instagram, working with Satya too.
And do you know when it begins?
I don't know. It begins in May.
May. Good. All right. So they still have a little time.
I really don't. Thank God I don't know anymore. So many things.
So we're gonna publish this soon, so people will have still plenty of time to sign up. Thank you so much, Satya.
Thank
it's always
you.
a pleasure.
And I really would love to join you in a tobacco dieta. I just need to find the dates. Really, I am giving a lot of time to myself now.
Good.
To really, to enter the 50s in a way, in a more conscious way. And more freedom, and with more freedom, and I'm enjoying a lot this moment. That brings a lot, but I would love to go with you. I will find my way to it.
Yeah, it would be a pleasure and an honor.
I'm letting go some work and not work. It's not the work itself, baggage, so I can be a little bit more free for that.
Yeah, I think we have a dieta coming up, but I think
Is when?
I think April 21.
But I think
I think it's the
Yellow Lotus, something like this.
Yeah, that's what Sophia was saying. We keep having the same.
Maybe
the
we
same
start
days.
calling. When are you going to do? So I can jump in one, or maybe in Peru too.
Yeah.
You do tobacco too there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will speak with Sophia to see if I can this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy.
It's been a pleasure.
The same.
All right, everyone. That is it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Satya. For me, it was a real pleasure to sit down with her again, to reconnect with her, to share a bit more intimately, a bit more deeper on some of these topics that I think are very close to both of us. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. As always, if you're able to support this podcast, that's a big help to me. Patreon is a really good option. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Those tiers give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. As always, thank you very much to the people supporting that way. And if you are able to support, I really like the idea of websites like that because they work off this idea of reciprocity. So if you feel like you're gaining something from this podcast, that's an amazing way to give back and to help me and us to continue making these episodes. If you're not able to do that, as always, helping with the algorithms is really useful. So if you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video, and if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or Spotify, leaving a starred rating and a short review. Also, as I mentioned in the intro, if you're interested in working with myself or my colleague Marav Artsy, April 21st, I believe, we begin our next plant medicine dieta here in Portugal. It's a beautiful opportunity to really learn to heal from these amazing teacher plants via the medium of tobacco. So if you're interested in that or you'd like more information, you can check out my website at nicotianarustica.org. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And as always, I hope this finds you all well. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for the support. I'm not exactly sure my next guests or the order, but as always, I hope to have some really beautiful guests on. So that's it. Thank you again, and I will see you all on the next episode.
Tunga